But that's what I mean. Listen, ladies and gentlemen, you gotta try the buzz. This is what the hug is talking about. Hulkamania.
Hello, this is Shane from Nerd Geeks. Today's topic is stop complaining about code excessively. You go into these different work environments and the crappy code and the code bashing. I've spoken about this before, but I'm going to get a little bit more in depth today. So what type of code do people call crappy? Well, we have a lovely website that I ran into, and you can see it right now on the screen. Let me give you a chance to see the URL. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. Okay, so what I like about this about this website and this particular article on crappy code is I kind of agree with all of it. And you have like 3 types of crappy code. You have the code that is rigid. Let me see where I have this here. Okay, your code is rigid if you can't change a piece of the code without changing the other modules that are irrelevant and have no relationship to the code you're trying to change. Yes. Totally agree. I ran into that quite often. There's a lot of rigid code out there, and it's crazy. Let me go to another point that he made in this article. You can have fragile code, and fragile code is if you change a small piece of the code in a module, you can break an entirely different feature in an entirely different module. And there's no easy way to find these errors during development. That is so familiar. And then, of course, non-reusable code, which is as the same as suggested, the code cannot be reused. But even though these things exist, I think that as a developer, you got to stay away from always making the complaint about the code. I mean, just imagine that someone hired you, right? You're the boss. And every time they assign you something, this code now becomes your scapegoat. That sucks. And at some point, I think it's like counterproductive. Like, dude, just get your assignment, know the challenges, and get to work on it. You right there running around talking, it's crappy, it's this, it's that. I've been in an environment where every excuse was that the code was crappy. But what I found was, even though the code was crappy, you were still able to get things done, which is the job anyway. Another thing that can be the side effect of always complaining about crappy code is most of the time the code that you may be insulting, the people may have liked the developer that was working on this code before you. You might just be alienating yourself by being somewhat disrespectful to whoever the last rock star coworker was, or like if you say hurtful things to like that, those may be your coworkers that are sitting there, and they shouldn't have to hear nothing but insults from you. They should just like, hey, you should be able to create some sort of environment and feel your coworkers out before you get into your self-righteous holy code mode. And most of all, judging code that you're calling crappy, it's not even being fair. Code has a life of its own. The code doesn't express how many times a dev has been overruled, how many things are a quick fix, and these quick fixes happen all the time. Like, I have put code out there and I'm like, I'm not even proud of this, but go ahead and check it now. Is it working? There being crisis situation where you have to fix things directly in production and then move the other way. Update it in production, change it in UAT, put it in dev, check it into source control. So you're constantly running into not ideal situations in this programming world. Yes, crappy, bad code, it has pain points. It can be difficult to make estimates, but I think after all these years, nobody really trusts devs in their estimates. Like, they hear your estimate and usually add 2 days. I don't know. Pushes to testing, UAT, and prod. Like, when you're dealing in this environment, it does make pushes to prod, so unreliable, because you're like, I pushed it, but, it just takes a lot of testing. And when you're messing with crappy code, code they call bad code, based on those 3 principles, it could sometimes make you feel like you're not really doing a good job. And so I understand why people run to that excuse. But I've seen a lot of stuff I've written, tons of stuff that I hope is not in the marketplace anymore. I hope they change some of that code. But I can tell when I'm looking at code, I can tell the history of, this is what the person was doing then, because that was the best practice at the time, and I've seen code that is so heavily criticized, but as I worked on it, I was like, well, it's not as bad. It's just you have to take extra time to study it and learn it. And when you're dealing with monoliths, these are applications that are massive with code everywhere. Big websites with, 80, 90 pages, at least in my experience. I think that's massive. When you look at your source safe history, you could see the names of all the different people that have touched that thing. All of those guys had to do their own flavor of programming. So I understand the pain points. I just don't think it's fair. And complaining about it, it's the job. There may be tons of reasons why the code got here, but think of it, it's just part of the job. You can't just work for a company and just say, hey, I've seen it done where people try to revamp the whole system. This code, these applications, they're costly to change. People are constantly paying you. And so you have to factor in cost sometimes, not actually, but as a developer, you need to know that, look, all these grandiose things I'm talking about or suggesting, they all cost. You're not paying for it. You have to at least be somewhat cognizant that, hey, this executive has probably had tons of people saying that they're going to save the day, and time is money. All right, time is money. I want to keep paying you for something that, look, it's not reasonably going to be replaced in 3 months or 4 months. And if it is, you better be speccing that out. I've worked in several companies where I thought a project was a bit aggressive, but I wasn't in charge. But I tried to assist at my best to help us get the success. But I've seen tons of money dumped into something, and I'm just like, this is not recoupable money. It's very difficult to be trigger happy when there's such a history of, well, that didn't work, well, that didn't work, that didn't work, that didn't work. Hey. While I'm trying to fix set crappy code, you're cutting into the income of the money, and your check isn't decreasing. You have nothing on the line, if it succeeds or fails. So, I think correcting crappy code takes time and analysis. You should understand the business domain. You should find the most cost-effective way to do those things, not just spend your time criticizing. Some of these companies with these monolith type application, it takes time to cultivate their customer base. And nobody wants their customers always complaining every time there's an update, every time there's an event. But first you have to get the machine running as effectively as it is now, and then try to understand the business domain, and then start looking at making changes. But once you make those changes, you have to own it. I mean, be ready for all the challenges that come with that. And so, crappy code or bad code out there, that's part of the job. And everybody, me, you, we all have it out there. And code that we wish we could go back and rewrite. There was a question posed that, how do you know that you're writing crappy code while you're coding? Well, I think it depends on how much level of experience that you have. But sometimes I run into this a lot with like developers that are trying to impress. They want to get in there and just start coding. And guys like myself, I'm not really in a rush to write the code. I'm going to look at this thing. I'm going to analyze it. I'm just going to look at it and absorb it and see what it's doing. It has a language. Code begins to talk to you and tell you what it's doing. It's pointing out where you need to make those changes. And then you get into a position where you get comfortable with what the code is doing. Without that comfort, there's no guarantee. I mean, you can't just take these modern principles and stick it in some spaghetti code. So I guess, how do you know you're writing crappy code? You're writing crappy code when you know what it looks like. I know what spaghetti code looks like. I know what spaghetti code in an object look like. It's still spaghetti code, but they stuck it in an object. There's object-oriented programming, and there's programming an object. No. I'm going to put this very structured and pretty, but I'm putting it in an object, so therefore it's object-oriented programming. Yeah, sure it is. Anyway, because you have experience writing that nonsense yourself, having other people do code reviews. And that is the key answer to crappy code. Code review. Sitting down and having a conversation about it. Time-consuming development, but quality coding. And that's how you know. When other people look at it, they go, okay, that's pretty good. That's solid. Okay, yeah, I agree. And you'll have somebody go, no, you probably should have done this. Oh, I have a procedure that does this already, especially if you're dealing in these monolithic applications, which is like one code base, all the code is in there, everything's done, no microservices, nothing at all. It's just a giant monolith, and you have to be careful what you touch and what screws you turn. Anyway, that's my little to say. Thank you very much.
And I just wanted to introduce you to my Nerd House Geeks channel on YouTube. And I have other videos out there dealing with other topics, of course. And just stop on by and check me out, subscribe to my channel, and I try to stay busy. Thank you very much. Thanks for watching my video. Like and subscribe to my channel if you want to. I appreciate it. And I'll share as much as I can about surviving in IT.